Hi everyone, William here with the Grand Duke Dmitri 1917 Diary series on YouTube. It's October 13th, 2025, and our diary entry today is from the 16th of September, 1917, which was a Saturday, and this will be the last of that long diary entry, the last text from that long diary entry. I think number 6. I think I broke it down into 6 parts. So for our recap, things were, Dmitri was kind of zooming in. He was going from a real general start. What's going to happen? I don't know. Nobody knows. To talking about Kerensky at the head of the provisional government, then the Kornilov uprising, then his own family, Paul and Maria, and Laming, Maria's marriage, and Paul's well-being. He doesn't seem to have known that Paul was under house arrest. Maybe he did. He didn't mention it anyway. And yeah, he did note that it was very difficult to correspond. So he had found out about Maria's marriage, but apparently did not know about the full situation with Paul, including the fact that his sister had gone or was about to go to meet with Kerensky himself. Okay, I'm rambling. Yeah, let's dive in. And now a few words about my life in Gulhek, beneath Sir Charles and Lady Marling's wonderfully hospitable roof. Though September 6th arrived while I was working on my previous volume, to the best of my recollection, I didn't say much about it. That notwithstanding, they were amazingly touching and kind toward me on my birthday. I even received gifts from Lady Marling, an old Persian book cover, an old Persian lac from Churchill and Maclean, old gold coins, sorry, I mispronounced that, from Lady Marling, an old Persian book cover, an old Persian lac, semicolon, from Churchill and Maclean, old gold coins and a seal, and from Yevrenova, a box of Persian workmanship. A box of Persian workmanship. There we go. It goes without saying that all of this touched me deeply, exclamation point. It was so gratifying to be treated with such kindness and attentiveness by people who hardly know me, while I am so far removed from family and friends. The only people who had thought to wish me a happy birthday in advance were the Lamings, my dear friends. If only you could know and hear the words I am addressing to you, how full of gratitude they are for everything you've done for me. I don't think I'm mistaken when I say that it would be almost impossible to find another man who would, like my faithful Georgy Mikhailovich, so wholly and completely give his life and thoughts to his friend, as he has done and is still doing for me. With the last batch of letters, I also received one from Karoli. Unfortunately, it is full of all kinds of incomprehensible and secretive nonsense which I did not entirely succeed in understanding. I fear that sitting there in Moscow, she thinks too much and says things out loud. All right, lots to unpack there. So yes, it was his birthday, the 6th of September on the old calendar, so it would have been 13 days... so 13 days ahead, the Western calendar, and so on the Western calendar it would have been the 19th of September. Now it's the 20th because we're now 14 days ahead. 1 day per century difference between the old Julian calendar and the Gregorian calendar, so the gap is widening, although very slowly. Okay, so... yeah, what did he get? He refers, I wanted to make a note of the fact that he refers once again to the previous volume, which has not survived. So, unfortunately. So, people celebrated his birthday and they gave him gifts, and they were almost all British, but there is one Russian, which is interesting. So who were these people? Well, the one I know most about was George Percy Churchill. He was 40 years old in 1917. He was the so-called Oriental Secretary at the British legation. And so, you know, the old-fashioned use of the word Oriental to include not just the Far East, but also the Middle East. So if you were an Oriental expert, you could be a person who spoke Arabic, or in Churchill's case, Persian, and, you know, be focused on Mesopotamia or any place in that region. So, you know, when I first, my first read-through of the diaries, when I first got them, I was terribly excited, of course, to see the name Churchill, but thinking, what the heck was Winston Churchill doing in Tehran in 1917? He certainly was not in Tehran in 1917. So this was a diplomat, and an important one in that region, would continue to be so. McLean, I don't know anything about, but Yevrenova was the sole Russian. She was the wife of another diplomat named Vladimir Yevrenov, and she will continue to be in the diaries up through 1920. So I think Dmitri was fond of her. I don't get any impression that they were up to any mischief, but yeah, she was a friend. She would become a fairly close friend. Okay, now the gifts, the lac is L-A-C, and this is lacquer, but I looked this up once a long time ago, but I'm not sure if it was a lacquer box or a lacquer what. He just says lac. And he liked old things, that's clear. They'd heard about that, so they were getting him antiques, basically. He would have been interested in that. And for some reason, this whole idea of ornate boxes, I don't know if that was something he collected, but throughout his life, when he talks about receiving gifts, people do give him these ornate boxes, and he gives them himself as gifts. I remember in 1921, he gave his sister, I think, he gave somebody one for their birthday. So, yeah, I don't know. I never, you know, it wasn't on my radar screen back when Paul Ilinsky was still alive, and I was meeting with him, and I never thought to ask him, you know, do you have any of your father's ornamental boxes? But let's see, moving on. Yeah, so then, you know, the most notable thing really for me about this section of text is this just outpouring of gratitude and love for the Lamings. Nobody else sent him, you know, the Hallmark card, I guess. I don't know, or it didn't reach him. He was writing this on the 19th, or the 16th. His birthday had been on the 6th. Nobody had sent him birthday wishes except for the Lamings. Why was that? I don't know. It's weird, isn't it? Okay, and so, you know, naturally he was very, very grateful. And looking back on how important both of them had been in his life, not just as, you know, sort of the upper echelon of serving people, but as friends. And he would later in his diary at the time of Paul's death say, I love Laming more than my father. We'll get to that in 1919. And, you know, those of you who have watched the videos for the 1906, 1907 diary entries know that sometimes he wasn't thrilled with Laming. I mean, he was 14 years old, right? And on one occasion, Laming slapped him for doing what Laming called an indecent dance. But, you know, Georgy Mikhailovich and Maria Nikolaevich were like mom and dad to both Dmitri and Maria. And Maria, in her memoirs, talks about how she and her brother liked to go to their apartment within the palace, and it felt like being part of a real family. And they had a son that Dmitri liked to play with when he was a kid, although Boris was, I think, 7 years younger than him. Maria called him the fat boy, in quotes. So I don't think she was quite as fond of him as Dmitri was. Anyway, yeah, a man who would so wholly and completely give his life and thoughts to his friend. Yeah, true. Okay. He would survive, by the way. The Lamings would survive, all three of them. And Dmitri would, be reunited with them in his exile. But the funny thing was, and I don't know if this was true across the boards with the emigres, is that the old relationships kind of didn't really revive. They didn't go back to being what they were before. And that brings us to another person, Vera Karali. Recently, before we started 1917, we had excerpts from her unpublished memoirs talking about how she met Dmitri and what role she played in the Rasputin assassination. She was never in any way pursued for that. She hadn't done anything. Well, she wrote the letter purportedly to Rasputin that was purportedly from Irina Yusupova, inviting him to come to the Yusupov Palace that night. But anyway, I'm digressing. So in these excerpts, she said that Dmitri was, of course, she said that Dmitri was madly in love with her. Well, he's not thrilled about getting this letter, and we'll hear more about that from him. He describes it as being full of all kinds of incomprehensible and secretive nonsense. So she's talking about plans afoot to do various things. Who knows? Just speculating maybe how she could help the situation with his father. Or later, if I recall correctly, he'll talk about her wanting to come to Persia. And he discourages her very strongly, saying, don't come. Anyway, at this point, he's a little worried about the situation. She could be saying things out loud there in Moscow. Already, we've seen, according to Maria, the trouble that the consequences that Paul had to pay for his wife's indiscretions and his son's indiscretions, with Princess Palais and Vladimir Palais circulating caricatures of Kerensky and other people. So, Dmitri's quite right to be a little bit worried about that. But, yeah, anyway, what do we have next time? Well, so this is the assessment, or the summary that Dmitri does usually every 15 days. Or is it every 10 days? Every 10 days, I'm sorry. I don't know why I had 15 in my mind. So now we're going to go back, 10 days, to the day of Dmitri's birthday, the 6th of September, and we are going to find out what fun activity he did on that day, and you can weigh whether you find it shocking or not that he did this fun, frivolous thing on his birthday in the midst of everything. All right. I hope to see you then. Bye.